Hello, everyone, and welcome for joining us today. It's going to be a great stream tonight. We're going to talk about taking events online. And it should have happened a long time ago. And I think some places have started to do this, but now we're actually being forced to do it, and it's great. And I've got some really amazing guests who have experience in this area, and I'm not going to do them justice by introducing themselves. So I want to bring them in now, and then please ask them any questions, and let's share your ideas, your questions, your thoughts, and any requirements that you need for your event. Just stick them in the chat below. So let me bring everybody in. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So let's go. So let's start at the top left. So we have Patrick. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Patrick Dubois. I currently work at SNIC, and we want to run a remote live conference.
Awesome. Amandine.
Hi everyone, my name is Amandine, and I am right now the founder of a stealth mode startup, so can't tell you much more about it, but I've been working with an early stage startup for the past 9 years. I'm super excited to be part of this discussion.
Cool. Simon.
Hi everyone, my name's Simon Maple. I'm a developer advocate here at SNIC as well. And look, I've done a number of different virtual events and communities over my time, the last 5 years or so. Again, similar with Patrick, looking at doing a virtual conference soon. And we're really at the stage now where we're trying to decide which platform to go for. So we're really happy to be here with this discussion.
Awesome. I mean, the agenda topics, I made some notes on GitHub, and I know people are already asking questions in the chat, which I really love. But let's, I think, start with the challenge, right? The problem. So I guess the issue is we want to be more inclusive for people, and I'm sure I'm missing things, so do jump in. We want to be more inclusive. We want to have anyone around the world join our events. We want to have closed caption, as I learned very recently that these are things that just get overseen. But closed caption is also important to be more inclusive. I don't join virtual events where you have to kind of install something specifically for that one-off event. So I like things to be easy. I mean, what's other people's thoughts in the actual kind of problem that we have?
So I think you're already a step ahead, Eddie, right? So a lot of people are still figuring out how to do it and kind of how to attend these things. And sure, inclusive is one thing. But it's just like, so everybody's kind of struggling to see how do we run these events? Does it have the same feeling as an actual conference? They're all worries that everybody has. Like, what gear do I need to have? Like, is this something too technical for me? Many of those questions are still there beyond going, once we got it running, to include more people.
True, you're right. I see Amandine's going to jump in there. Amandine, interrupt me because I'll talk forever.
I think also there is a sense of emergency right now because so many events are just closing the doors. Either they do it themselves or the location is just not accepting to have so many people in the same room. So I feel that also this sense of emergency is important because people don't really have the time to do a huge due diligence on what's available for them to move their conference from offline to online. So I think that it's also part of the discussion how do you deal with this to do it on a very short time?
You're right. Everyone, I can see on Twitter, everyone's getting really urgent and saying, right, how can I do this? And it's great that people are reaching out. I get lots of messages per day. And I think that's we're in a sad situation at the moment, but I think one of the positive is that we will do this more online and include more people. And it is difficult to set up. I don't think it's easy, but we were just talking before the stream started, and there are tools that are easier to use. Patrick was mentioned a couple, and there are some that are easier, but I think they're less flexible. So it depends what you need, and I think it's just getting something online, and then you'll learn from it, and the community will feed back. I think that's really important. So what else? So how can you take, I guess one of the questions that people have asked me, how can we take the community side to the online side? As in, how to explain it? How can we have that coffee track or that bit that when you go to a conference and you don't go to half the talks, but you still have an amazing conference? Any thoughts?
So for me, there's two aspects to it. There's the logistical. Okay, how do I even stream this? How do I get it online? And how do I get people to connect and consume the content? And that's for a lot of people who don't tend to do it that often, or even do it casually, like in a hobbyist kind of style. That can actually be quite daunting and quite hard to do, particularly if you wanted to take it to any kind of scale. But the second thing, and it is, irrespective of whether you've got the environment set up perfectly or not, the thing which definitely will really distinguish a virtual versus an in-person conference is that face-to-face nature. And us as humans, we react very differently to a screen than we do to speaking to someone face-to-face. Those conversations that you have in the corridor are always very, very important. They're often ones that you don't even expect as well. You just get to almost speak to people, random people that you didn't even realize you were going to talk to. So yeah, for me, that is one of the key things that I think is one of the biggest problem with some of the online solutions. And I don't think a chat is good enough because if you have one big chat, you get a lot of people who are more happy to type, but then they can kind of dominate the chat. So I don't know if I've actually seen, to be honest, I don't know if I've actually seen a solution yet that really matches up to it. But I think in times like we're in now, it's a case of, what is good enough? What can I do that will get me so far?
I think you're also raising the question on the type of events and the motivation for people to go to events. I feel that you have lots of events where you go there to learn something, and in this case, you want to ask questions, but you don't necessarily go there to network. But I think right now there is also a need for some tools or some ways for people to network, because networking is a huge part of everyone's journey. And when you go to an event, you don't just go there to learn anymore. You also go there to develop your network, get to meet some people. And it's not just about a relation between the speakers and you, but it's also about everyone else involved in the discussion, the small chat you're going to have with someone after a talk. And I completely agree. I feel that it's really hard to bring that vibe and that one-to-one element outside after the main talk in terms of tools online.
I think it's just been mentioned in the chat about kind of breakout rooms and like we said, coffee tracks and going between different talks. I'm a huge fan of Slack. I know this isn't the video part, but in terms of, as Simon said, that you're typing, I like the way Slack breaks it down. But then if you wanted to jump on a video call and have an audio chat, you can't. So this is where kind of leading into something like Discord. It's a bit like Slack, but you can just, not only in those sub channels, you can not just have chat, you can also then jump onto audio and video if you want to, and then you could splinter off again another room if you wanted to for smaller amount of people, because I suppose if you've got like 100 people on, it's not gonna work. But if you're all interested in talking about one niche area or sub niche, then you could break off again there. But with all these things, I think you need to then have moderators. So the more kind of sub niche you go, the more focused it is, the better it is for the community, but then also the worse it can become, because you always get those trolls online and those idiots. So therefore you need more moderators to manage it. So it's not an easy thing, and I think that's why a lot of people are talking about it and a lot of people want to do it, but I don't think that should put people off from doing it.
So a little bit from maybe from my experience, I've in a past live run some live shows as a platform and seen people do that. So there's actually two loops. There's the loop between the audience and the presenter. Like you are looping in the chat messages, and so people feel that they're heard, and that when they type something, there is this fast feedback loop. So when they saying it or when they seeing you, there's interaction. I've seen that happen with send me a picture of this, or what are you doing at home, or and that. So the scary part there is obviously because you're live streaming to, if you're increasing your number of users, like would you just put your chat up? No, right? So most of the time we use like a sidekick who's like triaging either the Slack messages or stuff that gets on the show. People can see all the things in the chat, but there's kind of some moderation, like you say, between what goes on air and what are the people like talking about. Then there's another kind of feedback loop that is going online, between the people. The thing there is obviously if you're chatting with 10,000 people, that doesn't scale because if this would be like a big number of people, you can't even follow the messages that are in the chat. So it's like, a lot of the Twitch kind of styles, they're just scrolling and scrolling. You can't even read it. So it's like useless. So what kind of, I've seen people do it, and I think Facebook does it as well with their hang time. You create like this kind of viewing parties where either people come with their friends, or you can do it moderated, like you would say breakouts. You put some people together. It gets like a slightly, group chat that isn't like the big grouping. So that kind of comes to the fact. But obviously, if they're random people, you don't even know, that they're interested to talk to or what's happening on that show. And I'm not gonna suggest, even though I've seen it, like do like video chat roulette, but that's a harder nut to crack. It's like random people connected, and it's not something you can do with the technology, just by streaming. I think that is more about when people would sign up. What are your interests? Like, what do you want to talk about? And you kind of curate them maybe inside of some meeting groups. At least, they have a topic that they have in common that they kind of can work out. Let's say on this chat, are you interested in how to run a conference, or are you interested in the gear? Let's suppose we split that up. At least the conversations keep going and be meaningful for the people within that group still. Just some ideas that I came into my mind. But it's all about the feedback loops, that you want to have this interactivity going, which you have in real life. I think that's the key part.
You mentioned a lot of great topics there. A lot of great topics. I don't know where to start, actually. Maybe we should pick one and try and go into a bit more into that, because you're right. People are here. They know the problem, I guess. They're aware of some of the challenges. I want some recommendations from us, I guess, on tech and software and those sorts of things. But I want to leave that a bit more to the end. I'm interested more in the community side, I think, from your experiences, because I think although the tech is a challenge, I think it's more of a finite challenge. There are less variables, whereas with the community side and the way to manage that and the feedback, I think there's a lot more variables, a lot more unknown. So what was one of the first ones that you said, Patrick? Let's pick that and let's go into it.
I think I said like a sidekick moderation to kind of help the person and kind of triage through what goes on air in the comments, but in a fast way, so that you as a streamer don't have to worry about it all the time. Follow the Slack, watch the screen, interact with the guests. So that's always really helpful.
Yeah, I think so. Having a moderator definitely helps. I mean, now I've only got kind of 18, 20 people online, so I can moderate it myself. But you're right. As soon as that number starts going to maybe 40, 50, there's no way that I could moderate that and keep an eye on the whole studio part, I think. And if you get into other streams of, not streams is a bad word, but another kind of modes of chat like Discord or Slack or whatever it is, then you need someone specifically in there with the authority to make the right decision. I think code of conduct is really important as well. I think having that clear and visible is always really important, although there are still people that don't, conform to it or interpret it very differently. And then what was your second item as well? I think there was, I should have written them down.
Actually, I wanted to tell that when you have a lot of Slack chat messages, you don't even need moderation because it will just scroll up. Like people don't see them anymore. So, even at that part, it breaks because it doesn't even matter anymore. I think the other one was more about the group setting, that, like the hang time or the things that watch parties or, watch with friends. Even though you're not sitting together, that really helps. I know of people watching like football games, even like that, with their friends. They have their Slack open and they watch it together and they see the same screen. That's kind of a way of keeping this cozy feeling. Yeah, I'm going to this conference, but let's hang out with 20 people, watch the show, and then somebody has like this inside comment and quirks and dork things they want to talk about. But that adds to the feeling that they're connected.
I really like that. You've given me an idea. I'm not going to go into it now. I'm going to let Amadine speak, but you've given me an idea for some event next week.
Oh, I can't wait to hear that. Jay, I just wanted to jump on a comment from Chuck Ting, who says that you need moderators to enforce the code of conduct. And I think the interesting thing about online communities is that sometimes you're going to have lots of people chatting, but you have some kind of movement where when some person understand the code of conduct in some certain ways, and they kind of allow themselves to say certain things, sometimes it kind of brings the entire audience to behave the same way. And so I feel that having some people that are kind of neutral, being able to respond to that and moderate this as soon as it starts is super important, because offline people will have more respect. People will be in front of you, so they're not going to start talking about other things or say some comments. But sometimes online you have some kind of effect, like movement effect, where people start behaving in some ways that really is going to affect the entire online community. And some people may misunderstand, or sometimes jokes are really easy to find the right dosage online. And I think that's one of the difference when you're running your event online in terms of moderation. It's not just about putting outside of the conversation the trolls, but it's also about kind of mitigating this kind of effect of the mass trying to go into one direction or the other. And it's just when you stop it early, you kind of save yourself for the future of the event. You don't want to do the entire discussion, the entire talk, and then at the end realize that you have very bad vibe on the chat.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and I think there's a few things. I saw a really good session by Donny Burkholz about I think it was Gentoo Linux or something like that, where there are a number of people who weren't good characters in the community, and it went on and on. And I think there was an issue with the policing of some of the things that were said, and it had many effects because people don't feel safe. Even having a COC there, there's no point having a code of conduct if it's not going to be enforced. So for people to see the enforcement, it actually makes them feel safe because they believe they are in a safe space because people are looking after them. Whereas when it isn't enforced, you will see more people join that community because a community will bring on like-minded people, and it's almost like it empowers people who think that same way. They'll speak out, and it's not just the person targeted that is affected; it's the listeners that then don't speak up and don't engage with the community that are affected. So yeah, I 100% agree with that. It's extremely important.
I think also the problem with some code of conduct is that sometimes you have a very long list of points, and no one really goes through all of them because you're like, well, okay, that's just don't be evil and be nice with people, and you don't really read it. And sometimes it's so succinct that it's good for communication and it's good for some platforms, but that means that people don't really take it seriously. So as you mentioned, having someone who enforce it also shows that it's not just something you put on paper somewhere to make some people happy. It's something you believe in, and it changes the entire vibe and relation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's definitely not a checkbox exercise, and I think some places do that, and some places don't, and some places err on the side of I don't know if caution is the right word, but in trying to say, well, making excuses for that person, and I don't tolerate that. I'd rather have half the amount of people, but no, everyone's happy there, safe there, and they're gonna, be a real advocate of that event rather than have bigger numbers by the stats. I know people need to have KPIs and need to prove to their boss, or the sponsors that they've got bigger numbers. But at the end of the day, if people don't come back next time or don't sing and shout about it, then that's probably not a positive. At the end of the day, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So growing fast and with the wrong people probably isn't right.
Yeah, we also found that this is one of the mental blockers for people who are used to just broadcasting stuff in telling people without any of the interactions. They kind of are scared what people will say. It's online, it's live, and so the only way you can get around it is indeed like code of conduct, moderation. There's some tools that help you kind of disable the trolls and kind of feed that. But that mentality blocker of yeah, something strange can happen and it's not prepared. This there are people scared of this interaction with the audience as well, and that kills the vibe. You can say whatever you want, but if you're scared of your audience, that just kills any interaction there.
I'm keen. I'm keen on the time. I know we're going to probably push on till 6:30, but I know Simon needs to go by 5:45. So I'm keen to cover, I guess, light touches across the topic, and then we can dig deeper with the people that are around afterwards. So I know we could talk about this for ages. I mean, Andrew's mentioned a really, really good point that like IRC's been around for like a long, long time, and they have gone through a lot of these challenges already. Maybe they weren't as strict back then, but those communities grew and the people were passionate about them. So they must have done something right. Maybe not everything, but they must have done something right. So hopefully we can learn a bit from there as well. I'm guessing there wasn't code of conduct like 20 years ago.
But it's interesting you mentioned kind of the group thinking, whether it's good or bad. I remember a plugin for Twitch where people could have their mouse go over the screen, and you would see all the people's mouse going over the screen, kind of like swarm voting to decide what to do next, right? So this is just another way of giving feedback. It's not the Slack, the chat, but this is like, okay, what do you want to do next? Here's a choice, a poll. So you kind of have to, those are ways to kind of keep the options that people can talk about in check, instead of having a free text choice. So that's one of the ways I think about it. Is like this is selective choice and moderated choice as well.
I really like that, and I think that actually be good for now. We don't have it, but to say kind of what topics or do people want to talk about next. I try to do some ideas and a journey, but I'm sure there are some topics that people are massively passionate about. So I will say this, and this is going to go horribly wrong, but write in the chat what topics you want to talk about. But it's not because it's a free form text. You could write anything, so it'll be interesting to see. But you're right, a poll would be really good. I think that's YouTube if you're watching. A poll system would be good. I don't think you can do that with any of the streaming platforms that I'm aware of. You might be able to do a third-party plugin.
You can do it now on Twitch. I think it is integrated into Twitch. I haven't really dig much about how you make it happen, but now I've seen some streamers doing this live, having some polls live. For many years, they've been using like other websites, so they had to copy the link in the chat. But now you have it.
Yeah.
It's good that they are adopting this. But I think it's also raising the question of the different way of keeping the community engaged. And as you mentioned, it's not just about the chat. It's about what else can you do if you don't just want to talk about your own life on the chat. Like there are lots of people who are just watching, and it's good to give them another option without having to have the username displayed and then what they want to say. Especially not everyone is fluent in the language of the conversation. Sometimes some people are just shy, and it's good to have different way of interacting that works for everyone.
No, that's true. And someone's just raised a really good question about body language. So how can we keep that, I guess, engaging? Because, when you're talking to someone, if you're going into too much detail, you can kind of see that they've maybe not so interested and it's gone too far. They might have asked a question and it's gone into too much detail. I know that happens a lot with my family when I talk about tech. So how can we do that? I think having, like, when I do meetings with clients or colleagues, you've got to have the video camera on so you can see them, because you don't, most of the time, if I don't have the video on, I'm like on my phone and I'm kind of just doing something else and only half listening. But when the camera's on, I'm paying more attention. So I think that's important, and maybe having some guidelines around you're not too far away or you're not too close, so you're going to kind of get like half the face, or if you're too far away, you can't see the facial expressions. I mean, that's just my opinion. I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts, or even if that's solvable in a live streaming environment.
Yeah, so I've got some thoughts on this, and I think I think while a lot of the things like obviously the image, the voice, the whether you move facially as well as kind of like body functions, a lot of that is kind of like a confidence thing. It does help people kind of to listen in. If it's like one monotone kind of voice, it's harder to stay awake maybe. But I think the thing to remember here is content is king. And I think for me personally, and in fact, me and Patrick were talking about this on for all the talks online, which is the conference we're going to be pushing in the next month or so, virtual conference. We're talking about the duration of the talks that exist in the conference. And I think if you were to do a talk that is like, a 1 hour, 2 hour kind of session, you're always going to get like some sessions that are going to be, really quite good, other sessions that are going to be quite dry. And even the sessions that are going to be good, how long can you really capture someone's attention for? So, if it's like a 25-minute, 30-minute thing, even that for me sometimes be too long. It depends on the topic. There are also things like we were talking about Ignites or Lightning Talks, Patrick, as well previously. And, those kind of things where it's a 5-minute, let me take the idea. If I like it, I'll actually look at it in my own time. If I don't like that topic, that's fine. I know I've got a 5-minute nap, and then I've got another topic in 5 minutes that I can engage on. So I think that the content, and also how that content's delivered. I might be speaking, I might be doing some slides, hopefully not too many slides. I might be doing some live coding. I might be doing some demos. There's things that you can really actually engage people on, and go to find what people actually want, geek people out a little bit, find their nerd happy place, and try and exist there.
It's having that balance. I think you mentioned quite a few points there, and in terms of duration, I think it's about having that balance, right? You don't want death by PowerPoint slides, or sometimes coding demos can go on for too long or they're too short. I think it's just finding that balance and knowing, I think being clear in the title and description how advanced or beginner it is. I mean, I'm going to name a conference here. I love FOSDEM, but one thing that gets me is it's really unclear if I go to a talk, if it's a beginner's talk or a complicated talk. So usually I just kind of take the risk or be near the door and I can leave, because sometimes I want an intro into X topic, but they've just gone to step 100 already, and I'm like, well, I'm lost already. Or vice versa, I'm wanting that advanced stuff, and it's kind of, this is hello world, and I'm thinking, well, that's not what I need. So maybe being clearer on what level, and not like medium, low, or high, because everyone's medium, low, and high is very different, but maybe with some concrete examples. And you mentioned another point I just want to add. You talked about content is king. And I agree, but also I slightly disagree. So I'm going to kind of give eSynergy, or We Are eSynergy, in the chat a mini shout out, but also some constructive criticism. So they do their content is great. Their most recent live stream, I call it a live stream, as a webinar, was really good. But I had to install something to join, and if it wasn't Harriet, my friend, running it, I wouldn't have bothered. There's so many events that I sign up to, and then when they send you the link and they say, right, you got to install this, I'm like, delete, not interested, you lost me. So I think you got to lower that barrier to entry. I think I mentioned that already, but yeah, just make it really easy and accessible for everybody on the Mac, PC, as we mentioned, closed caption as well. I don't think you need these enterprise tools. I don't know if I'm allowed to say
that.
And just actually to flip that question on the other side as well, because you're talking about it very much there from an attendee point of view, listening to the presenter. How can you keep them engaged, right? But from the presenter's point of view, because the presenter is equally faced with a pane of glass in front of them rather than a room of people, from their point of view, they actually lack a lot of feedback as well. Are they speaking at the right level? Are they, without that feedback from the audience, are people nodding along? Is it going too fast, too slow? Are they hitting the right topics? Without that feedback, it's really hard for the speaker to actually speak at the right level and in the right topics. So, it's kind of a two-way thing as well, to actually, no one can guess exactly what 80% of the audience wants. You just hope what you're doing is the right kind of level. So I think that's another challenge which is hard to overcome.
But for that, I feel that we mentioned having moderators to moderate the audience, but I think also having some kind of some friends part of the audience, just telling you if the sound is right, or having an intermediate, just checking in with the community, giving you feedback on the audience, and potentially moderating the conversation. I feel that online you have so many content available. If you want to hear about the topic and hear someone giving a masterclass on something, you have courses, you have lots of content, lots of people with amazing YouTube channels. And if you want to go to something live, I feel that the interaction or having a live discussion between lots of different people is super interesting. I love panel discussion, and I find that it's a format that is great to have online. And having one person that is reading the chat, asking the right question, and preventing people from rambling too much is also a great way to have a buffer between the community. It's a hard task for the person who'd have to do that, but still I feel that it can be super helpful rather than having one person who has to manage everything directly and deliver the content at the same time.
Yeah, I think it's even easier than text. Like as a presenter, I always like to watch the friendly nodder on the first two rows because I know he's friendly and he keeps me going. But if we think about Facebook and like Periscope, just watching the emojis and not even the text, you kind of see like the tenor of the audience, like what they are thinking. They're all booing. Yeah, it's scary, and you can kind of decide not to go into it. But yeah, I once was at DevOps Days Amsterdam, and you would speak to the audience, but on the left, the right, and just in front of you, they had like massive screens of animated GIFs sent by the audience during your talk. So it was really kind of strange, but it gave you a lot of feedback. What are people thinking? What comes in their mind? Just that feedback. And I think none of the solutions actually has this I speak, okay, I see myself, but it doesn't have the feedback mechanism on the same I see myself of the audience coming back to me. So that's something I would love to see more platforms on that way.
I'm conscious of the time, so you've got about kind of 10 minutes before we lose Simon. We can try and hold him for a little bit longer, but we might get in trouble. So some other topics I think that people would like to hear from all of us before, like I said, Simon has to go. I think we've talked about some really interesting topics. There's been some great questions, and we will address those questions shortly. I'm really keen to actually hear from other people about speaking to a camera or speaking in public, but we'll talk about that later on. I think let's talk about some of the technical stuff. I think some of the questions were around that, technical challenges and some technical solutions, maybe some recommendations from us. So start off with what do you need? We were talking about various options before the stream started, and I know I have my preference, but I won't go first unless you want me to. Like right now, should I talk about what I'm using now?
Amandina, go ahead. You're passionate about this.
I am, and I just want to mention that you started touching this AD earlier. The fact that whatever the technology you want to use, there are many platforms, there are many great tools, depending on how complex the system is, the type of hardware you have many solution and combination of tools you can use. But I feel that one key point is actually to make your content available to the greater audience. That means that corporate tools, as you mentioned, like Zoom or other tools that you have to download, may be a barrier to entry to your audience, and that's the first thing. Before thinking about what kind of setup or hardware you want to use, the platform you want to use to talk to your audience is a big first question. And in my point of view, it has to be super easy. You don't have to pay. You don't have to download anything. You can access it from your phone or from your computer. You can log in and log out, or stop the stream wherever you want, and it has to be also available later on. So I think all those different aspects are, in my opinion, very key before even thinking about what kind of hardware do I use, what mic should I get? Should I hire someone to help me out? Should I do it DIY? Should I do it remote with a remote guest? I think the first thing is, how do I reach out to my audience? Who is my audience for that? And will they be able to consume the content that I create live or not live easily without any problem?
And I've got my preference for my platforms. I've got experience in Twitch, and everyone knows I'm on YouTube because you're all here now. But Amadine does something different. Again, going back to her experience and her playing with different technology, I think she uses something called Restream, where she actually streams to multiple platforms. And that might sound amazing. I'm on the fence about if it's a good idea or not, so I'm not going to give my opinion on that because I don't have any experience in that. But that is possible if you want to stream to YouTube and Facebook or Twitch and Periscope. That is all possible, or all of them. That is possible to do it, and there is a service to do that. And I think it's reasonably priced. Oh, sorry, Amadine.
I was just saying, you don't need to have 5 computers for that. It's just one broadcast, and then the tool send it to lots of people. Yeah, that's what I'm using. But in the same time, it's kind of divide my audience and doesn't bring everyone at the same place, which means that the channel will grow separately. So it all depends on your strategy for that. I agree.
So I think you have to go where your users are, right? So if I'm thinking maybe more corporate people, that would be maybe LinkedIn Live. If that's tech people, YouTube, that makes sense. If it's maybe younger gaming, and I know Twitch is somewhere in between. It's starting to ramp up, but it still has this, like, not everybody has this wants this Twitch experience, or they're not used to it. And the same thing on Facebook. Some people don't like it there on the content. And restreaming is a good idea to kind of, wherever your audience wants to consume your content, that's where you're at. And the same thing is with logging in. If you're putting these, authentication mechanisms after a system that nobody has an account on, it just will create like drop-offs. If they already have an account, it's just a click and they're in. And that's really key in the low friction of getting people, watching the show.
That's true. It does reduce, again, the friction, the barrier to entry, if people can watch it on a platform that they're comfortable with. And that does make sense. I can't argue with that. But then it also does divide your audience. You don't know where you should post certain parts of content and so forth. So I think people should take that. You should use their initiative, or maybe try it and see how it goes. It might work really well for someone, might not work well for others. I think that's important. And
it also brings the question of regularity. If you're organizing a one-time event, you may not have the opportunity to test it out. So you may have to be right in one go, because you're not doing a series of stream or a series of events. You're just doing one big event that you have used to organize offline, and suddenly you have to do it online. So I think that for that, it's going through lots of research and talking to maybe small amount of people who are representing your audience, because you can't have the chance to be able to test it out several times.
And you can always change later, right? If you pick something, if you say, hey, I want to do something on one platform, and then after a couple of events you decide that's not for you for whatever reason, then you can always change. I don't think you're fixed. I see big streamers do that all the time, usually because they're getting paid to go to the other platform, but that's a different story.
Yeah.
You're very transparent about where people can find you. I feel that people who are shifting channels for their live stream, for example, they have a strong presence somewhere else. So everyone knows that, for example, they are on Twitter, and so whatever platform they're using, they're going to let you know through their Twitter account. And I think that's the same for companies. They should be super clear about what the best way to know about where to find the content later on. So you may choose to do this or that, to use this tool, to have this type of link, but at the end you need to have a communication that is very easy to access.
I've already started answering some questions about the software in the chat. So if everyone's happy to move on from platforms, I'll jump onto that unless anyone wants to add any more about platforms.
Yeah, there's one flip side that we didn't cover, maybe in general, is that people want to watch the streamer, but for a conference, there's usually also the sponsors and the booths and this kind of fair. So that's something that's not on these platforms that we haven't really figured out. And I'm not saying we need the 3D avatars of people watching in the room, but it's something that isn't there yet. And in some ways, some sponsorship is important. So we need to have a way to give back to those people as well.
And equally, well, on top of that as well, when you do have a conference, you typically have more than one stream as well, right? So you might have concurrent streams, and if that's running on YouTube versus kind of more of a virtual conference platform, I guess it depends on how experienced you would be and how much you want to take on. You'll need a much greater team if you didn't use a platform, for example.
I think events do have like 3 tracks, and I was speaking about this with Andrew, who's in the chat at the moment, about how you would try and do that. Would you have kind of 3 YouTube channels, or I think it just makes it more complicated. I think we're not there yet. It's probably best to try and maybe stick to a single track, or again, my opinion. I mean, we shouldn't try and overcomplicate it. We've got other challenges first, I think, like bringing in sponsors or bringing other people or switching other people. So I also was looking into this for an event I might live stream next week with for GDG Cloud, and someone might want to give an intro to the conference. This is not me, this is someone else. Can I bring them in for 5 minutes? And then a sponsor might want to talk, and then you might put the sponsor's logo on the stream, because you can see at the bottom right of the stream, you have my little chibi, my cartoon character. So you could put the sponsor's character there, logo there, and you could bring them in for 5 minutes. But that all makes it more complicated and a higher risk. But I think it is possible. As we said before the stream, again, I'm probably pushing ahead into the software, so apologies, but Ecamm, you can bring up, I think, to 4 or 5 people on Skype, I think it was. Is that what it was, correct, Patrick, did you say?
Yeah, 4 or 5. And I think there's a Switcher Studio is one as well. vMix has this. You can have guests just joining by the webcam and coming in, or from an iPhone or somewhere remote. And that's easy, but that is just when you put them online somewhere in the stream. No, the sponsors too, that have the same problem. They go to a conference to meet people and talk about their products, and so with these virtual conferences, they feel left out because there is no conversation. So that's another thing you kind of need to tackle on that.
That's true. I don't think I have an answer to that one. I suppose just you mentioned vMix, so just I've over the last couple of weeks been looking into those other alternatives to OBS, because I'm using OBS at the moment, and Ecamm's only for Mac, and it is a kind of a simplified version of OBS, so you're very limited to what you can do. vMix looked very impressive. It is quite expensive, but it did look very impressive. However, it's only on Windows, and vMix does a lot of stuff that I would like. People can join via the browser, you can bring them in, you can customize it. It just seemed really elegant, but yeah, it's only on Windows, unfortunately, and it is quite expensive. And there are some other free tools as well. I think Amity mentioned Streamlabs and OBS Live as well, which I think is another one. It's all built on OBS. I think both of them are built on OBS, but they've just customized it further and made it more user-friendly.
So in the broadcaster industry, there's several tools that allow you to actually have the mixing studio in the cloud. So you're not that dependent more on your local computer, which is really scary. If your computer dies, there is the stream gone. And so it's more about connecting remote people to a point in the cloud where you do the mixing, like the views, and there's plenty of bandwidth. That's another interesting approach, instead of having all the gear locally, the network locally, and that takes away a lot of the risks during a live stream as well.
I've tried to look into cloud solutions and I haven't come up across anything that I think is quite suitable yet. I'm sure there is one out there. I haven't looked very hard. So yeah, any recommendations, I'll be interested to know about that, because that just helps bring in, a lot more collaboration with different people. And I think that's really important.
I don't want to interrupt, but I just want to say thanks for including me, and I'll see you again soon. Cheers.
Thanks, Simon.
Oh no!
Yeah, sorry.
Leave your video going, please, otherwise it will mess up my stream.
I will do. I promise.
Mute yourself though. Thank you. That's awesome. So that's one of the challenges of OBS. So I've brought my guests on via Hangouts, and I've kind of clipped Hangouts and put it in the squares. But if Simon had left, then everyone would reshuffle, and I'd have to kind of re-clip each person's kind of space on the Hangouts. And so that is one of the challenges that I do have. So it's really flexible. So it's great that you can do those sorts of things. But if anything goes wrong, then yeah, you kind of have to redo stuff again.
With modern tools for live streaming, I feel that we are kind of always testing things and always in a DIY mode, even though we're doing this regularly. You have a huge amount of experience. You've done so many live stream. I've done quite a few myself. And every time I still feel that something may break, something may not work exactly perfectly well. Or sometimes, as you mentioned, it's just Simon left and it could break the entire thing if it's just disconnect. And it's not a matter of level of professionalism from you or from us. It's about the tools. It's a bit too funky. It's a bit tricky to make it work as you want, because you don't have a super high level of professionalism from the tools you're using. You're kind of bringing together different things and try to make it work. And every time you launch the stream, you're like, is it going to work? Am I going to be disconnected or for some reason not connecting to a platform? You always have a little thing that doesn't work as you expect.
That is true. That is so true. Sorry, go on, Patrick. No, please.
No. Like, one of my nightmares was always when you stream to one of the platforms and your connection is cut, they kind of end the stream. And then it's scrambling to bring up like the new page and notifying all the watchers and doing that. There's ways. No, that's one of the advantages of one of the cloud solutions is they keep the stream kind of hot while your things fail, and then you keep your streaming going. Also, that's one of the first things I learned is that you need to have like a sorry page, just by saying, there's a problem. One key press. Hey, we're off. Have some patience. That's one of the things I learned pretty much first thing. So
that is one of the reasons I actually moved from Twitch to YouTube. YouTube, if you stop streaming, it still keeps the stream live, but with no feed going to it, and just with a kind of, I think, its own holding page or the thumbnail that you added when you created the stream. So that's one thing I do like about YouTube. They have changed that with the new YouTube. So that is pretty cool. And I mean, I see some of the comments saying, "Oh, what a setup in terms of, you need OBS, need Hangouts." That's like, I'm gonna try something a bit crazy now, so hopefully I don't bust the stream. But I'm just gonna swap my video out with my behind-the-scenes camera that I think people saw in the Hangouts, and I just want to say you don't need this, but this is obviously something I'm very proud of. It's taken me years to set up. I really hope I don't bust this. Let's see, fingers crossed. Let's see. So I should swap out, I hope. And then that's kind of the behind the scenes sort of videos. That kind of worked. So you don't need this sort of crazy setup. You don't. But you do need a powerful computer. OBS is really resource hungry. That's why I like the idea of... so I've got an iMac Pro and I'm running it like 60%, which is quite high. So I do really like the idea of the cloud version. That's something I need to investigate a lot more. I think that's a good option for everybody, right? Because if someone else could then take over, or someone could set it up, but then someone could just pass it off and then just say, look, it's all set up, kind of, here you go, run your event. So I think that is a really interesting concept.
I like to have things locally. I have to have a big machine and run everything on my big machine. I don't know, maybe because I'm a big nerd and the thing you have, Eddie, with camera, I have it with computers. I don't know, but I like to have my big computer next to me and knowing that yes, it is powerful enough to run everything I need, or to know its limitation and not just to get something on the cloud and not being sure what's going on. I don't know. It's just my personal thing.
Your life will be better if you do. Like I've been a server, backend engineer, data center guy. Yeah, just the fact, we used to want to have our servers next to us, give them pet names. No, no. So this is not the way forward. The fact that you can have collaboration, like Eddie mentioned, have people prepare, take over the show. If even if they're working in your streets, right? I even don't think I have always the same bandwidth, depending on what my neighbors, use of my bandwidth. Those are just risks. The bigger you show, you don't want to take in that. But it's fine if it worked for you. But it's more like it works on my laptop, and then the rest of the world is fine.
And so we talked about the. Let me just switch back my cameras, otherwise you're kind of talking to the back of my head, and I think that's not very great. So let me just switch that back. Hopefully this works. Nothing's broken. Everyone's still there. That's good. So yeah, there's the software side we talked about, and there's also the setup and the layout, right? So I've got the chat on the right. I've got different people that I mentioned before where you are. I've got the closed captions below, which I think is important. And this is actually the first time I do this. Then what else? There's the layout. There's the marketing before. There's the marketing kind of during, and then there's the marketing after. That doesn't change, I don't think. That will be the same as a physical event. I'm guessing that's the same. Am I right or wrong?
Yeah, so the buildup of that's a campaign you're building, basically, right? So having people come over, I think having it regularly always helps for online, streamers, that it's like at a certain time. It's going to be interesting to see how conferences will evolve from it has to be this day to the conference will be on every Friday for 2 hours. So maybe the model will just shift in that way for how we do conferences, and everybody knows like on Friday at 2 o'clock I'll just hang out at this conference. So that maybe that's just changing things from that perspective.
Yeah, I think if it's a kind of a regular meetup, then yeah, having it at the same time every time I think is really, really important. I'm really bad at that, so I'm probably not the person to talk about that. I just stream whenever I kind of feel like it, and usually with 5 minutes notice, which isn't great. So, yeah.
In terms of the marketing, I think also one of the changes is that lots of people, for meetups, for example, you expect when the meetup is free to have 50% people turning up and 50% not being able to join. But I feel that we don't necessarily have enough data when it comes to online conference because people don't necessarily register. They don't necessarily feel the need to register online. So it's really hard to predict the impact. It's really hard to know if it's actually going to be at the right date. I feel that sometimes there are some external environmental factors that makes one stream work better than another, and I feel that it's something that is hard to predict. While for offline events, you can have an idea of other events taking place at the same time in the same location. Here we're talking about something more international. So that's something to take in consideration in your marketing. And also you can't just, in terms of approaching sponsors, we mentioned earlier getting your sponsors in your video. Well, that's one thing, but also sponsor in advance want to know how many people register, how many people are attending, comparison with the previous years. This kind of things, this kind of data. And I feel that there is also kind of an educational discussion to have with the sponsor. I think lots of them those that are sponsoring streamers online get this now. They get the idea, they understand the metrics, but I feel that the more traditional sponsor that may sponsor an offline event and that is going to follow a conference that is going to move online needs some kind of education on those metrics and some expectation. And I think we need maybe to have a few conferences to kind of lead the way and maybe share their process, how it worked for them and the metrics to explain to the broader conference ecosystem.
So
Yeah, I think it's interesting because if you look at the learning space, something like Coursera, right? So in the beginning, they had these videos, and you follow through the course, and so they tried like doing live courses from universities and kind of live stream that. And what they found is that they actually switched to recordings, and then the speaker or the teacher would actually spend their time answering questions all the time. So the discussion came up like, what is the additional value of watching a stream, like somebody doing it live, or watching it recorded first, and then having the awesome discussion live with a lot of people? So, live shows are pretty much fake sometimes, but it is like this psychology of, yeah, it's live, but whether it's recorded or not, you'll probably don't notice the speaker because he will just present. But it's like the questions and the answers and the interactivity that will make the difference.
that's actually taken off quite a lot in YouTube. So YouTube have the Premiere option. Premiere, I think that's how they pronounce it, option. And at the beginning, when it first came out, everyone was like, I'm asking you a question and you're answering me in the chat. Why don't you answer in the video? It's because the video, like you said, is pre-recorded, and the person who can now focus on the chat. I know I've missed lots of great questions in this chat, so that is one benefit of doing that. But I prefer to answer verbally rather than on the chat. But then my streams do take so much longer, and as Andrew Cunliffe in the chat has always said, it turns into kind of more the Eddie show, and I end up just losing track of what I was planning to do and just end up chatting to people in chat about their Q&A. But I think that works well. I think it's about finding a balance probably. But Premiere style is an interesting way to go and think about. I never think about that, but I think it is an interesting one to look at.
But what you're saying is that you're airing it on let's say at the time, let's say now at 5 p.m. you're airing the video instead of a live stream. But what if you would have the video earlier? Because then you would have people watch the talk at their own pace, learning, noting their questions, and then you go live with the speaker, and then he will kind of fire all that stuff away in a more like group discussion based on the video, like the homework everybody had to watch it. So I don't know whether that makes more sense.
Oh, I see what you mean. Sorry, okay, I misunderstood. So you actually show the video well beforehand and then just go do the Q&A afterwards. Okay, yeah, that's interesting as well.
I'm wondering if this kind of model will really bring lots of engagement, because that means that you need to get people engaged on a very long duration. They need to first all watch the video and then all ask the right question at a specific timing. I like the idea. Just wondering in terms of people's engagement on this entire duration, how would this work? I think you mentioned classroom, things like programs like Coursera or online classes, they may have tested this kind of model where you watch the video and then you use the forum and you have a limited time to do the course. So the forum is kind of timely, where you follow the course at the same time, but you can watch the video whenever you want. Yeah, I'd be quite interested in this kind of model too. Not sure how it will work for video and live stream, but we'll be interested in the metrics behind it.
I think there's some more.
Yeah, it's just maybe you record the plain broadcast talk before, and then you will have to have just a guest going through the event. But everybody's better prepared instead of having to think of questions ad hoc or something. I don't know. Maybe it's more of you do a teaser of 10 minutes and then you kind of spark the questions before you go live. That's also a great asset you can share before the show as something for the marketing that loops people in, instead of just the visual, hey, there's going to be a talk you hear like 5 sentences. So maybe that will shift too.
I think there's something we haven't mentioned also is what happened after the event. I think in terms of communication, well, everyone has their own system, but it works the same for offline and online. But I think that the key point of online conferences and live stream is that you need to make the content available, but it also needs to be interesting, just consumed standalone. That means that if you just ramble or talk about something that is so specific to one user, it can be tempting to have this one-on-one discussion, but then does it make sense for the viewers to watch this afterward, after the live stream? I think, Eddie, you mentioned on the chat that your stream work better when you engage with the chat in your video. And I completely get that. I mean, I feel it sometimes frustrating when there are not many interaction, because I really love that. And I think that what makes sense for my content also. But I always wonder when I watch the video afterward or when I share it as a podcast edition, is this going to be interesting enough, or can I transform the question from the viewer into something more global that is not just, oh, I have this problem for my specific startup, but more, okay, how can we talk about this problem as a general problem that many people may have? So it's still engaging for people watching afterward, even if you haven't been live or if you're not this specific person, like shifting from this one-to-one discussion into something that people want to see offline afterward.
I think that's possible, and that's where it becomes more of a skill to the person probably presenting to do that. And again, that's just, I think it's just practice and practice. And like I said, I've been doing it a long time, and I don't think I get that right. I never turn my streams into a podcast, but I do turn my videos into podcasts because they're edited and they're more concise and so forth. I'm not worried about the ums and all that, although I should be, but again, ignoring that sort of side. But in terms of the value, then being a one-sided conversation, yeah, you need to include the question in the answer and also make it more generic to apply to more people. I think just, I want to kind of take a side step for a second. It's something that I just thought of, and I should have mentioned it earlier about the whole different platforms and webinars and all the rest. There was, I'm not going to mention any names, but someone watching knows who they are. They did a webinar, and I installed what I needed to do and all the rest. And then I missed part of it because I had to go drive or whatever it was, lost it on the tube. I can't remember what the reason was. But when I caught up on YouTube, there was none of the presenters' cameras. It was just the slides. And for me, I'd stopped watching because I felt I couldn't see how passionate they were about that particular part they were talking about. I felt I couldn't engage with them. I felt something was missing. The content was probably still good. It was just missing something. And so I think, going back to what we discussed before, always having that video there is important, even if it isn't at the highest quality. I think audio needs to be at a high quality, but that's probably a separate discussion. I mean, if you look at my video of my square on the bottom right, that's probably the highest quality. And if you look on the left, that is left, right? Yeah. On the left, my behind the scenes camera, that's really low quality, but I think that would be acceptable if my audio was still top notch. And especially if you want to take that to podcast, then you need your audio to be, really crisp.
Yeah, it makes me think about when you mentioned, you need some video, and I get that, but I've had so many, I'm still from IRC time and, have doing lots of chats, and people I've never seen in real life, and I would get that connected feeling. But it would be less about one person dominating like the screen or talking, obviously, but you can create this kind of, group feeling just by having a good chat and conversations and everybody chime in. But I guess it's again the feedback that you lack, from the presenter. Like, is he sitting there? Is he like bored? Is he just reading? Obviously you have the voice, so you'll pick up some hints. But I totally get it. Some picture in picture is always nicer. It tells you more. Depending how good looking that person is, of course, not me, but but yeah, it's this engagement that really works.
And once again, it depends on what you're doing exactly. Is it a discussion? Is it something that you're really passionate about? Is it purely educational? I think the type of content you're producing or the type of events you're organizing may change a lot the type of content or the way you're showcasing it. And so I don't think there is really one solution that fits everyone. For example, if you look at podcasts, there is a big trend to have also a video, but kind of a video put somewhere in a studio. Why not? I mean, that can be a way to address people who like video and people who like just audio only. So I think it depends on your own audience, what you can do easily with your own setup and what you have, and any problem or any priorities you may have, but it needs to work for you, for your organization, and for what you want to deliver, and for your audience. So I think it's a lot of testing and trying out what works best for you and your content and your brand.
I think most people can't answer that until they've done maybe 20 or 30 of these. When it comes to a conference, obviously different, but when it comes to the company, the brand, like you said, what works for them, I think they just need to get started. My biggest piece of advice that I will give today is just pick something and do it. Even if it's wrong, it's going to be better than doing nothing and just dwelling on it, because then at least you can get some feedback. I mean, to go back to one of the software, to go back to one of the missing features that I really felt engaged when I was watching a live stream was when I asked a question in the chat. They loved the question, that they included it in the video, and it came up with my profile picture and the question, and they answered it. But in the video is the question that I typed out, and I love that. Unfortunately, OBS doesn't do that. Ecamm and vMix do, which I think is just one amazing feature that I think it just makes that person feel really, really special. Maybe it's just me, I don't know, but I felt really special.
Yeah, as a speaker, when you submit your talk to a conference, you have to come up with this abstract, and it's kind of fluffy. Maybe you don't know yet where you're going to talk about. And what I started doing is just like my initial thoughts on the abstract. I would put it online in a Google Doc, and then I invite people just to comment, like, what do you want me to have talking about? And maybe there's another opportunity there, is just before you actually do the talk, have this kind of discussion. What do you want to have in the talk as another episode right before, a couple of weeks before, because already you kind of feel what people want, what sticks. You get some cool ideas from people you never thought about, and that just increases and I think it's an opportunity you could do with the live streaming quite easily.
I really like that. I think that can be applied, like you said, you're doing it already now with Google Docs, and I think that's a really useful takeaway. I think that can be applied, from years ago. I don't know why more people don't do that. I'm one person who doesn't do that. I will be doing that, but I will not be doing it with Google Docs. It will be open source on GitHub. So we did talk about tech and solutions, and I briefly mentioned kind of like missing features. What else? There were some questions that I've missed. If you are watching, please copy and paste your questions, re-put it in. I can't go back through all the history. It'll take me too long. But do put your questions back in. And any other topics you think that you both you think are important that people should be aware of. And I'm keen also, 5 minutes before we finish, for us to kind of give a conclusion and a takeaway. So let's just leave that in the agenda as well. I would like some actions for people later on too.
I think we kind of covered most of the main points. I think maybe we have raised more questions that we answered for some people, but that's the thing. It's once you identify what you need and the different roads, then finding the best system, finding the best tools is kind of an option. It's about do you want to start? How to get started, but you can find all this on Google. And what's important is to think about the right questions to answer, more than really at the end which software you're going to use. Then it all depends on your own system and everything. So I feel that even if we raised lots of questions and maybe highlighted a few features that are missing, you still do have lots of tools available for lots of different of configuration and lots of different type of event, from one person talking to a large audience, to remote discussion like this, or even to full conference that are completely filmed and live stream on different platforms. So I think there are lots of options today, but it just has to start with the right discussion, the right conversation on what you want to achieve, before thinking, okay, let's just do it with the right tools.
And I think Andrew Barnes raised a really good question where he said, moderators don't just help in, any trolling to ban those people or remove those people or whatever it is, but also picking out maybe the questions that are really useful to everybody. And then I said I missed it in the history, and it would take me too long to kind of go through and read it. They can just kind of somehow highlight it or share it, make it obvious, and that's something again that would be really useful. So hopefully all these startups that are going to come out in the next kind of few months, hopefully they'll cover some of those. I have been sent some links today of ones to look at, which are supposed to be all-encompassing events, community all in one. So I need to do a bit of research on those and see what those options are like.
Mm-hmm. But I think finding them online is not the difficulty. It's more having feedback on how people have been using it and if it works for what people have in mind. But I think for that, you can definitely ask people who have been using it, or ask people who are doing live stream, just saying, hey, have you tried this tool? What do you think? People are very keen to share their experience and just saying very transparently, oh yeah, I've used this and this was good for this and this reason. But for your own setup, like, you can ask people, and I feel that the online community has been also in the same situation, trying many tools, so you can always ask people their feedback on that.
I think the feedback's the most important. I spent last weekend going around different tools, and I was reading reviews online and watching videos on YouTube and all the rest. I actually ended up where I started, back with OBS, but I think even though I read those reviews, you have to choose what's right for you as well. I think it's good to get that feedback, absolutely, but understand why people are using certain things and certain platforms. So different platforms they all have their pros and cons and so forth. So I think, choose what's right for you. And as we said, I don't think there's any harm in changing. And we did raise a lot of questions today, so I hope someone's made notes. Suze is asking if there's a transcription, so hopefully we'll get those questions. And there are so many people out there who probably couldn't make the stream today, who might have answers to some of those questions. And with more and more people going online as well, streaming, can we somehow have a catalogue of what streams that are coming up, and maybe put them into categories and subcategories and all the rest? Because I think I don't watch a stream after it's happened usually. Maybe that's just me, but because I can't engage with people, I'd rather watch the shorter, concise video. So for me, I'll happily watch a 10-20 minute video, but I'm not going to watch a 1-2 hour live stream if I wasn't there when it was live. I don't know if you're both the same, or people watching are the same, but I find that my live streams on my YouTube channel, they get their views, their watches in that first 24 hours, or in that first few hours really, and then after that nothing happens, because it's just too long. I can pull snippets out and use that for shorter videos, or even shorter, to put that onto socials. But I think being live is about being there. I know Andrew also raised the question about, when I go to events, I sometimes miss the talks, but because I'm networking and meeting new people and seeing old friends. So we got to think about how we can, I know we've mentioned this already, but how we can reinforce that community side. And I still think Discord has some legs. I need to do some research and see, combining that with YouTube somehow. I don't know if that is possible. They've both got good APIs, so maybe we can do something. We can do a live stream on how to hack some third-party plugins together.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Patrick. No, go ahead.
No, speaking of hacking, one of the things that I really liked is that you mentioned you were sometimes live coding stuff. Now with the concept of mob programming, I don't know if you're familiar with that, with multiple people working on the same code at the same time. And then, bringing that up as a stream is like so nice. Visual Studio has it built in that there's an audio feed of people joining, there's a chat. So that, again, is not the one person doing the show, but multiple people kind of figuring this out. And that's been like insanely learningful. I'm a person who watches 1.75 speed YouTubes. I'm sorry about that. Because like you, I want to skip through fast. But life is, still the moment you take your time, you listen, you tune in. So it better be worth my time. And I don't want to put the pressure on you, but it is important to keep people engaged during their precious time.
That is true. So Amadine, you were going to add something earlier.
Yeah, I was actually about to say that personally I am like you, Eddie. I watch lots of live stream, but I like to watch them live. It happens sometimes that I watch a shorter version, or sometimes I watch an entire live stream, but it doesn't happen very often. Most of the time, I prefer to join live, and even if I can't stay for the entire duration, I try to join live. But funnily enough, many of my videos got lots of views afterwards. So not a long time afterward, but in I would say the first few days, that's where I have all my views more than live, which I don't understand because I love live. But anyway, and also I feel that Andrew raised the questions about getting people engaged and talking to each other. Personally, when people on my stream are talking to each other, I love it. I mean, I don't have to be the center of attention, and my guests, well, they are supposed to be the most important thing happening on the stream, so that's about them. But also I really like when sometimes I have several people talking about a similar topic. It makes things harder for me to follow the chat because I see lots of things and I can't really see and or spot easily the questions. But then I'm just super happy that people can connect, and it happened a few times where I had investors on the stream and some people from the team, as the same team as the guest, and they started talking to each other and exchanging contacts. And I was just super happy to see kind of a different level of discussion. It was linked to what we were saying, but it wasn't directly questions or connected. And I understand that some people may not like that because they're like, oh, I'm doing my live stream, you should be listening to me. But actually, I appreciate that. I don't mind if some people are making some jokes and create that kind of a subtopic, if it's kind of related to what we're doing. And I kind of like that. But I feel that it's harder for people to manage that part of another discussion and another live stream.
That is one thing I think is missing, that I would like to include more people. So if someone raises, quite a few good questions, I think, let's bring them in for 5-10 minutes and let's bring them into the stream. I think that would be really engaging. But as we saw, it's not so easy just to you can't just send somebody a link and then they join. And I suppose you got to be careful of trolling because they might ask some really good questions and you think this person's really good and you bring them in and then they're not the person that they originally made out to be. So there is that challenge. But I guess that's where it becomes that regular streaming, when you get to know someone who's regularly always adding value, answering other people's questions, not just asking questions themselves. They're adding value to the chat. And if they're adding value to the community on a regular basis, then you might promote them to a moderator or include them in one of the live streams. And I think that's really important. That's something I definitely want to do more. So anyone watching, if you want to join me on a live stream, just let me know. You're more than welcome to. And also, I think both of you should give a shout out. I know you introduced yourself at the beginning, but I know Amadine's got a YouTube channel. Well, she streams on everything, so I don't know which one's her favourite, probably Twitch. But you should definitely, Amadine, put a link in the chat to your sure. YouTube channel and whichever social channel you want. And same with yourself, Patrick, as well. I think it would be good for people to follow you, especially see what's happening in these times where things are changing to going more virtual online, and both of you got so much experience in that space. I think it would be people would be interested to know more about that and what happened. I mean, it's going to be exciting times. It really, really is. I can't wait. I really, really can't wait. So what is the conclusion? Shall we conclude and let people in the UK get time to go for their food? Everywhere else they might have eaten, or it might be lunchtime. But let's conclude. I've got some strong thoughts, but I'll probably go last. Who wants to go first? No takers.
Go ahead.
Shall I go first? I don't mind.
Go ahead, Eddie.
Okay, I'm probably going to miss some things out, and I'll remember to add them in later on. But what I'm going to say is, get started, get streaming. Like this weekend, just do a test stream for yourself or for your company. Just do it. You'll learn so much. You can't, go to the gym and watch someone else like do sit-ups and wonder why you're not getting the six-pack and you're not getting the benefits, and your body would react differently to theirs, etc., and so forth. So just do it. Go live. You don't need any fancy equipment like I've got. It's taken me years to build up. Even just your mobile phone. Just use your mobile phone and whatever app you want, Streamlabs, Twitch, YouTube, etc., and just go live from your phone. I think that's really important. And from there, you'll have more questions, more specific questions, rather than about just how to go live. You'll have questions about, well, how do I do this thing? How do I do this specific thing? How do I integrate with this platform, etc., and so forth? And that's where I think it becomes more valuable to the community and to yourself. So yeah, do that. And if you have any questions, do let me know. You can put comments in the video after the stream is over. So do put comments in. And I can take screenshots of my OBS setup, because I appreciate from the screen behind me, you actually can't see my screen. And I can show you what settings I use, what I do, and how I go about it. And we can have some more specific conversations on that. And I hope to see you in more streams. But anyway, enough from me. I've forgotten a few things anyway. So let's move. Who's next? Patrick or Amadine? Shall I pick?
I can go next. That's fine. I can always find something to say about anything anyway. I think as a wrap up, I would like to just say that and highlight that you mentioned and you're pushing people to start and get started. And actually, that's thanks to you that I got started eventually. But the thing is not just also about getting started, but also thinking about what you want to do, who you are talking to, and that's great advice for individuals. And I understand that when you are potentially a brand or a company that planned an event offline that has to switch suddenly online, it can be super stressful. And I think the thing that could help is that you need to be do not complexify anything. Try something simple, a setup that is quite simple. Don't try to do too much, and just be transparent with your audience. Everyone is in the same situation right now. Everyone is struggling with event organization. Everyone has been either denied some events because the space is not accepting any events anymore, or in prevention, people want to just cancel the event or bring it online only. And I think everyone today understand, like, we receive so many events every day. I have my Eventbrite emails just saying, oh, you registered to this event, it's not happening. So just be transparent in your communication. Don't try to hide it. We're all facing this. So just be transparent with people and provide the right information. If you haven't yet figured out which setup, which channel you're going to live stream your event to, that's okay. Just tell your community that, well, you're figuring this out right now, and what is the best channel to know about the link, even if it's shared at the last minute. That's completely okay, but just tell people, communicate to people. I think the worst situation that can happen is that you don't tell anyone anything. People think that's going to happen. People think that it's going to still happen offline, and people will be unhappy because they don't have a clue what's going on. So whatever it is, and even if you don't know, just say you don't know. But just start communicating to people about the situation, because, well, we just all understand, and if they're interested in the topic, they will follow. So just try to keep it simple and transparent.
Yeah, and to add to that, it's okay to fail, right? So don't worry about it. When you're a speaker, nodding creates more empathy than when you have something in your throat or anything. So people are really understanding. You're doing your best. And it's, be authentic. That's what makes things authentic, that it's not too polished, that it's you. And so it's your style, whether you're like Eddie energetic or me boring as hell. It's your style that makes the thing work, and that's what attracts your audience. And even though that's a couple of people, that's fine. You'll have good conversations. You'll have feedback. You'll make new friends. And if you're a tech person, I would explain the analogy. It's like putting your first GitHub project online. So before you're thinking through the million things you need to have right. No, don't think about that. Just do it and experiment. And that's the exciting time right now. Everybody's entitled to experiment with this because we're gonna need this, and it's gonna be the new normal of what we do.
Please don't cancel your events. Just move them to online. And that's the last thing I'm just going to add, because I get so upset to wake up to so many messages saying cancel, postpone. I think I got like 30 events in September. I don't know why everyone's postponing to September. So just move it to online. And if you want to have a follow-up in person later on in the year when things are better, then fine. But let's still keep the collaboration going, and let's just move it to online. We might not gain everything that we have in face-to-face, but you gain other things. You get a wider community. You get people who couldn't travel to your event because of family commitments, accessibility, or they live in a different country and can't afford to fly in and attend. So I think there are some cons, but there are some more pros as well. So just continue to have those, and we'll be here to help. I've shared some links in the chat. Amadine and Patrick, if you want to share any more, feel free. And let's continue the conversation. Let's continue the conversation. Wow, it's been a long day. I think it's time for my bed.
Yes, if it's Friday evening.
It is. Right, I've got
Time to get a beer.
I've got the holding ending scene up. Let's see if this transition works, because I haven't tested it yet. Thank you everyone for joining and for your questions. It's awesome, and I look forward to chatting to you more on social. So I want to press this button, and fingers crossed it shouldn't break. Bye all.